You look around the coffee shop, and every single head is bowed in prayer to a glowing rectangle, and you realize you are the only one actually drinking the coffee. The woman across from you hasn't looked up in 7 minutes. The couple in the corner, they're sitting together, but they're not together. They're somewhere else, somewhere that promises them connection but delivers them isolation in high definition. And then there's you. You ordered your coffee. You're sitting with it. You're watching the light change through the window. You're noticing things. You're here. Now, if you're Gen X, born between 1965 and 1980, you might feel something watching this scene. It's not superiority. It's recognition. You remember when this wasn't normal. You remember when sitting alone with a cup of coffee and your thoughts wasn't considered a waste of time. It was called having a moment. My name's Frank, and here's what's important to understand. You're not rejecting social media because you're afraid of it. You're not avoiding your phone because you don't understand it. You quit social media, or you never really joined in the first place, because you understand it too well. You understand what it costs. And that's what this is about. You were born in an analog world. You remember payphones and landlines. You remember the thrill of getting a letter in the mail, an actual piece of paper that someone took time to write. You remember silence, real silence, not poor connection silence, not loading silence. Silence where nothing was happening except your own thoughts, and that was enough. Then the digital world arrived, and you adapted. You learned email. You got a Facebook account because your niece asked you to. You figured out your smartphone. You didn't grow up with these tools, but you're not incompetent with them. You're selective. And that selectivity, that distinction between tool and lifestyle, is the thing that younger generations often never learn to make. Because here's the truth that nobody wants to say out loud. Social media wasn't designed for people like you. It was designed for people who grew up inside it. It was designed for people whose sense of self got built on top of likes and comments and the dopamine hit of notifications. For you, those things are optional. For younger generations, they often feel like oxygen. You have an advantage, and you're not going to waste it. Trait 1, the highlight reel skeptic. Let's talk about what you see when you look at someone's Instagram feed. You see a photo of a couple at sunset on a beach. They're golden, windswept, laughing. The caption says, "Finally took that trip we've been dreaming about for years. Life is good." Now, here's what a Gen X brain does with that information automatically, without even trying. You wonder what the beach looked like before the photo. You wonder if they fought that morning. You wonder if one of them is broke and pretending not to be. You wonder if that sunset lasted 4 minutes before the lighting changed and the moment died. You wonder because you've lived long enough to know that every single moment is a highlight reel and a blooper reel at the same time. This isn't cynicism. This is experience. You've thrown parties where nobody could see that you'd cried the night before. You've smiled in family photos where your marriage was already ending. You've posted a photo once in a while on your own terms, maybe at a grandchild's graduation or at a retirement party. And you've watched people respond with emoji reactions that feel hollow. You've learned that the reaction doesn't match the reality. Younger generations grew up believing that if something isn't documented and shared, it didn't happen. If you took a vacation and didn't post about it, did the vacation even occur? If you had an experience and nobody on the internet witnessed it, does it count? You know the answer. It counts more if it didn't happen on the internet. It counts more because it's yours. This is why you're immune to the highlight reel, not because you're stupid, because you're experienced. You've seen too much of the gap between the photo and the reality. You know that every single person on your feed, every single one, is curating. They're performing. And you made a conscious decision that you don't want to spend your retirement years either performing or watching other people perform. That's not being out of touch. That's being clear-eyed. The skepticism that Gen X developed, the eye roll at marketing, the suspicion of official narratives, the refusal to be impressed by things that seem too good to be true, that same instinct applies perfectly to social media. You learn to see through the performance, and once you see through it, you can't unsee it. You can't look at a friend's vacation photo without automatically wondering about the unposted fights, the unposted costs, the moments that didn't make the final cut. So you stop trying. Not because you're against happiness or celebration, you're not. You're against the lie that what you're seeing is the whole truth. And you're especially against the idea that you should measure your own life against someone else's carefully constructed fiction. That's the highlight reel skeptic at work. And it's one of your superpowers. Trait 2, the time protector. There's a concept that gets thrown around a lot when people talk about social media. It's usually phrased something like, social media is stealing your time. And that's true. But it's not quite precise enough. It's not stealing your time. Time is just hours. Hours are hours. No, it's stealing something much more valuable. It's stealing your attention, and attention is where your life actually happens. Think about the difference. You have 24 hours in a day. That's fixed. You can't negotiate with the universe for 25. But your attention? That's the resource you can actually protect. Your attention is the difference between a day you spent and a day you lived. When you're retired, something shifts. You don't have a workplace structure anymore. You don't have meetings or deadlines or looking busy. You have something much rarer. You have real time. Time that is actually yours. Time that you don't owe to anyone. And suddenly, the question becomes urgent. Where is that time going? Now imagine if you were still on social media. Imagine you're sitting at home and you pick up your phone to check something. Just a quick check, you tell yourself. And 3 hours later, you're still there. You've scrolled through the lives of 47 people you barely remember from high school. You've read arguments in the comment section between people you don't know about topics that don't affect you. You've felt angry about a political post from someone you haven't spoken to in 20 years. You've looked at someone's vacation photos and compared your life unfavorably to theirs. And then the day's gone. This isn't a moral failing. This is by design. The algorithm, the invisible system that decides what you see next, was engineered by people with PhDs in behavioral psychology. These are smart people whose entire job is to keep you on the platform for one more minute, then one more minute after that. The goal is to make you unable to leave, to make leaving feel like deprivation. It's not a coincidence that social media is designed to feel like an addiction. That's the feature, not a bug. But here's where you have an advantage again. You remember what it felt like to not have that pull. You remember boredom. You remember being forced to sit with your own thoughts because there was no alternative. And you know what happens in that space? Life happens. Thoughts happen. Creativity happens. Rest happens. When you delete the app, you're not giving up anything that was ever real. You're not losing genuine connection. You're reclaiming hours. You're reclaiming the space where you used to read a whole book instead of scrolling. You're reclaiming the evening where you used to have a conversation with someone you live with instead of sitting next to them in silence, both of you in your separate digital worlds. This is what it means to be a time protector. You understand, with the clarity that only comes from having lived without social media, that your attention is your life force. And you're not handing it over to a machine that doesn't care about your well-being, a machine whose entire business model depends on you being not quite satisfied, always reaching for one more scroll, one more like, one more dopamine hit. In retirement, you have something that money can't buy for most working people. You have space. You have hours that don't belong to anyone but you. And you're choosing to spend them in ways that actually matter to you. That's not quitting. That's finally being able to choose. Trait 3, the privacy vault. There's a particular type of freedom that Gen X understands almost instinctively. It's the freedom of not being known. You grew up in a world where what you did, what you thought, what you wore, what you liked, those things were yours. They didn't have to be broadcast. They didn't have to be curated for public consumption. Your life was private by default. If you wanted to share something, you made an active choice to share it. But the default was privacy. Now the default is exposure, and you have to actively choose what not to share. Think about what it means to be on social media. You're not just sharing the photo of your dinner. You're creating a digital footprint. You're allowing an algorithm to learn your tastes, your politics, your habits, your fears. You're allowing strangers to know when you're home, where you travel, what you care about. You're creating a profile of yourself that can be sold to advertisers, analyzed by data brokers, or used against you in ways you can't even anticipate. And for what? To show your friends that you had dinner? The privacy thing isn't paranoia. It's not about having something to hide. It's about understanding that privacy is a form of power. When you're not interesting to the internet, you're free. When you don't broadcast your life, you can live it. Here's a concrete example of how this works in retirement. If you're not posting about your vacation plans, nobody knows when your house is empty. If you're not posting about your aches and pains, you're not inviting unsolicited advice from people who don't know your medical history. If you're not posting about your finances, you're not signaling to everyone you know, or people who used to know you, how much money you have or don't have. More importantly, if you're not posting, you're not creating the obligation to seem fine. You're not under pressure to present a version of yourself that's marketable. You're not performing wellness for an audience. You're not curating your own story. There's a term that therapists sometimes use, keeping your own counsel. It means that you don't tell everyone everything. You have an inner circle, and outside that circle, you're just quiet, uninteresting, gray. And that creates a kind of protection. The people who matter to you know what's actually going on. Everyone else doesn't need to. Social media inverts this completely. It makes you feel like you need to explain yourself. Like if you're not communicating what you're doing, thinking, feeling, if you're not making it visible, then somehow it didn't happen. Or you're being out of touch, or you're being unfriendly, but you know better. You know that a life well lived is not a life that's constantly being externally validated. You know that the people who matter to you will stay in touch without social media. They'll call, they'll text, they'll email, they'll visit. And the people who only know you through your social media feed, those aren't actually your friends. Those are your audience. As a Gen X retiree who's chosen privacy, you've made a radical decision. You've decided that your inner world is private. Your vacation is for you and the people you went with. Your accomplishments don't need to be public. Your struggles don't need to be turned into content. Your life doesn't need to be constantly broadcast. And suddenly, you're free. Free from the anxiety of how you're being perceived. Free from the comparison game. Free from the feeling that you need to justify your choices or explain your happiness to a bunch of people who are basically strangers. The privacy vault isn't about being secretive. It's about being whole. It's about understanding that not everything needs to be shared to be real. Trait 4. The reality anchor. Somewhere around 2015, human conversation started to look different. You probably noticed it. You're sitting with someone, maybe someone you've known for decades, and their phone buzzes. Maybe it's a notification. Maybe it's just the general anxiety of being away from their device. And the conversation changes. Their attention is divided. They're partly with you and partly elsewhere. You hate this. And you hate it not because you're old. You hate it because you're someone who remembers what a real conversation actually feels like. A real conversation is a rare thing. It requires that two people are actually present with each other. It requires vulnerability. It requires listening, not thinking about what you're going to say next, but actually hearing what the other person is saying. It requires the kind of attention and focus that basically doesn't exist anymore in people who've grown up with smartphones. When you're a Gen X retiree who's not on social media, you're not just opting out of the app. You're opting out of the idea that real interaction can happen through a screen. And once you've made that choice, you start to notice how rare actual presence has become. Let's be specific about what I mean. You know the feeling when you're with someone who is really there. Your full attention is on them, and their full attention is on you. You're not performing. You're not thinking about how this moment will look in a photo. You're not mentally composing what you're going to post about it later. You're just in it. That's when real connection happens. When you delete social media, you're not trying to be a rebel or prove a point. You're trying to create the conditions where real presence is possible. You're trying to live in a way where the people around you don't have to compete with a glowing rectangle for your attention. This becomes especially important in retirement. You probably have relationships that matter to you, maybe a partner, maybe friends, maybe grandchildren, and you want to actually be with them, not be physically present while mentally scrolling. The reality anchor is the part of you that chooses the boring real conversation over the stimulating digital noise. It's the part that would rather spend an afternoon talking with a friend, really talking, not comparing messages, than spend that same time keeping up with 200 people on social media who barely know you. This isn't about being anti-technology. You're not. You have email, you have a phone, you probably video call your grandkids. You're not trying to go back to 1985. You're trying to stay grounded in what's actually real. Human faces, human voices, the kind of connection that happens when two people show up for each other without a screen in the middle. The digital world promises you connection, but what it actually delivers is simulation. It feels like connection. It has the same shapes and colors as connection, but it's missing something essential. It's missing the stakes. It's missing the vulnerability. It's missing the way that actual human presence changes you. When you're the reality anchor, you understand this difference intuitively. You don't need a study to tell you that a real conversation is more meaningful than 47 likes on a post. You just know it. Your nervous system knows it. So you create a life that prioritizes the real conversations, the real presence, the real relationships, which, it turns out, require actual time and actual attention. And that's not deprivation, that's abundance. Trait 5, the identity owner. Here's a question. Who were you before the internet? If you're Gen X, you can answer that question. Not with nostalgia, not with "I was happier then" or "things were better," but with clarity. You had an identity. You had a sense of self. You knew who you were without external validation. Your identity came from what you did, your skills, your interests, your relationships, your values. It came from the books you read, the music you listened to, the people you hung out with, the way you moved through the world. And importantly, it was internal. You didn't need someone else to tell you who you were. You didn't need a mirror held up by the internet to confirm your existence. Now, younger generations, people who grew up with social media, they often have a different relationship with identity. They know who they are partly through how they're reflected online. Their sense of self is built on feedback from strangers. If they post something and nobody likes it, there's a moment of doubt. Did I do that right? Does anyone care? You never had that. You never developed that dependency. When you were younger, you figured out who you were through direct experience. You tried things. You failed sometimes. You succeeded sometimes. You developed tastes. You developed beliefs. And nobody was keeping score. Nobody was recording your failures. Nobody was building a quantifiable metric of your social value. This is a massive advantage in retirement. Because retirement is actually when a lot of people struggle with identity. You spent 40 years defining yourself as the person with a job, the accountant, the teacher, the nurse, the manager, and then you retire, and suddenly that's gone. Who are you now? For people who are dependent on social media for their identity, this is a crisis. They suddenly need to recreate themselves in the digital space. They need to prove that they're still interesting, they're still relevant, they still matter. But you're an identity owner. You know that your value was never dependent on your job title, and it's not dependent on your social media presence either. Your value is inherent. You're interesting because you have interests. You're valuable because you're a human being. You matter to the people who love you. That's it. You don't need to perform your retirement. You don't need to document it. You don't need to prove to anyone that you're living a good life. You just need to live it. An identity owner is someone who believes and who has lived experience proving that your sense of self doesn't require external validation. You existed before the internet. You knew who you were, and you still know, not because you're older and wiser, but because you never outsourced that knowledge to a machine. This is a profound freedom. It means that you're not spending your retirement years trying to build a brand. You're not trying to gain followers or prove your relevance or perform wellness. You're just being, and that being is enough. Let's come back to that coffee shop. The woman with her head bowed to her phone. The couple sitting together, but not together. And you drinking your coffee, watching the light change through the window. You're not smarter than them. You're not better than them. You just made a different choice. And that choice came from understanding something that social media doesn't want you to know. That your attention is sacred, that your time is finite, that your reality is more interesting than any digital simulation of it. Gen X gave the world something that nobody talks about anymore. We gave the world skepticism. We didn't believe the official story. We believed our own eyes. We knew that institutions would lie to us, that marketing would manipulate us, that things weren't always what they seemed. And that skepticism turned out to be the perfect inoculation against social media. You see the algorithm trying to make you addicted, and you laugh. Because you've seen worse manipulation than that. You've survived worse than this. Deleting social media in retirement isn't a loss. It's not you giving up on staying connected. It's not you becoming out of touch. It's you graduating. You've gone to the school of social media, looked around, and understood what it's actually teaching, and you chose not to enroll for the next semester. You're choosing to live in a way that Gen X uniquely understands. You're choosing to be free, free from the performance, free from the algorithm, free from the lie that your life needs to be publicly verified to be real. Your coffee is warm, the light through the window is real, the people you love are real, your time is real, and that's enough. That's everything. If you enjoyed watching this video, I would absolutely love it if you hit the like button, and if you want to see more videos like this, hit the subscribe button. Once again, I'm Frank, and until next time, take care.